Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who has lots of songs written for him and so on. And that is a story about his sometime in his beginning of life. Now, we came to speak with it, and it is written here. Why they describe Rabbi Yehuda in the text, in the former text, that describe Rabbi Yehuda as the head of the speakers every place. Now, it's a strange title, because Rabbi Yehuda was not officially the head of any very major any major rabbinical position. But so why is Rabbi Yehuda called the head of speakers everywhere? So it says that was a result of a whole story. Now the story will be told in small installments, but basically it is that it was once upon a time that there were three of the great masters of the time, three of the great Tanaim of the time, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, and were sitting and talking together. It was surely not a formal or a public appearance. It was just these three people were sitting and having a discussion of important subjects, but not for public consumption. So they were sitting together, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, who was a scholar, a younger scholar, which is possibly, it's right to explain his name as the son of proselytes, but it is not that clear. Anyway, Yehuda ben Gerim, who was some kind of an important but a younger person, was sitting nearby, and they were discussing, and they came to discuss, which is not usually the subject, but because these three people were also friends to each other. They studied with the same master, and so they were in many ways close to each other. So they have a discussion, and so the discussion was what we may call it general politics, not in any detail of the story. And so Rabbi Yehuda began by saying how, it says in the translation here, how pleasant are the actions of this nation. How pleasant, and in a way, how nice, which would be even a more exact translation. How nice are the actions of this nation. This nation, which means that it is the nation, the ruling nation that was ruling at that time. It was the major power in the great part of the world. So the Romans were there. It was, one has to add to it, it was not such an easy time, because it was seemingly after the war of Bar Kokhba, in which it was a very big revolt against the Romans. It was one of the most bitter battles that Jews have had against the Romans. They say that the number of people, Jewish people killed at that time in the Eretz Israel was about 1 million people, which is a huge number anywhere. Anyway, it was the country was decimated, but people were still alive, and it became quieter. So these people are sitting and they make a kind of a general summary. What would you think about the Romans? So Rabbi Yehuda says, they basically, except for the war, but if we make a judgment of the Romans as people, as rulers, whatever it is, they are basically nice people, because they created markets, which was, the Romans were great architects in general, and they created in almost every country which they came, they made order and made some basic, what are called architectural changes in cities and in the roads and so on. So they made markets, they made bridges, and some of these bridges are very, very well done, because there are still some bridges that are 2,000 years old and still intact, and they still were still factual. And they made bath houses. Now the bath houses were not just bath houses for simple. The bath houses were almost like popular clubs. People came there. People came to the bath houses. People spent time in the bath houses. It was a kind of people were doing it. It was a quite a popular and common way of enjoying oneself. So he says, so all in all, they are doing things. They are building, they are mending, they are changing, and they are doing the good things. So that's Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yossi kept quiet. Now, Rabbi Yossi is described in other places as a person that keeps his counsel. I mean, he's always waiting until he comes to a decision. So he was not, even though they were speaking, and basically it was not a public speaking. It was a discussion among friends, but still he kept quiet. He was thinking about it. And then Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was again a friend of the former, but in many ways, in more than one way, a more fiery kind of a person. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, and he speaks about the Romans in a very derogatory way. He says, whatever they did, they did only for their own uses and for their own wishes. I mean, it is not, they are really not interested in the welfare of the people, even though in many places they have done a great deal of work in almost all over the world, all over the Mediterranean and beyond it. But still, basically, all these things that you speak about the Romans, about whatever good things that the Romans did, was just it is for their own uses and for their own wishes. Okay, they made marketplaces. There are marketplaces just in order to put prostitutes in them. See, the prostitutes have to work somewhere. So what is a better place? You have big squares, big open places. So the prostitutes sit there and they do the business there. So that is just very utilitarian and surely not praiseworthy. They made all the bathhouses because they want to enjoy themselves. I say they are just these bathhouses are, say, they had in those times. One has to remember they had warm bathhouses that were very elaborate and very complicated. I mean, with central heating and with people staying there for hours, sitting, talking, doing exercises. Okay, so they did it just because they want to enjoy themselves. And they made the bridges because that is the point in which they can take toll. They can't get the taxes, the tolls from the people. So they mended the roads that they made, and the bridges that they made are just points in which they can get more money. Which is, he looks at the Romans in this case. I mean, they are interested in their own wishes. They are just I don't know if such discussions are done in America, but out of America, many people are talking about all kinds of big powers, big empires, from Russia to the United States, and trying to make a discussion, some kind of evaluation. Are these big powers that make things, that make new order, that make things, is it done because there is some kind of a utilitarian point in it, or is it just for a simple way of getting more money in a more orderly way? So this is a discussion which doesn't stop. But in that way, we have here Rabbi Yehuda, who was seemingly also a more benign person and a more quiet person. And so he speaks about it and says, okay. See, basically they're making the world better. better roads, better bridges, better marketplaces. The world becomes civilized. So we have to be thankful. And Rabbi Shimon, he admits that they are doing all these things, but he says all these things are just means of oppression and means of getting their own wishes, and they are not really interested in the people. Okay. So this was a discussion. Now this is a discussion that it is just people give their opinions, whatever it is. Now, then Yehuda ben Dirim went and told the words. Now, it is clear, even though it is not from the end of the passage, it can be understood differently. It seems that Yehuda ben Dirim was there. He went. It was a very interesting discussion, of course, because it was. People speak about big politics, and who is speaking? Some of the main leaders of the generation. They speak about it. So he told about the discussion. It is clear from the text that he was not an informer. He didn't want to inform anybody. He was interested, and it's surely an interesting subject. So he went and told the story. Now, because when stories are told, and that was incidentally, there was a rule that even though the discussions in Beit Midrash, in the place of study, were always open, but the idea was that nothing that has been discussed in the study hall doesn't go out. Now, that is a kind of a rule which, among other things, allows the scholars and the people that discuss things to have a freedom. Because when you know, as it is now, that you have a reporter under the table writing whatever you say, and when you have somebody making pictures, and somebody will tell the story to the next pair of interested parties, you can't really say what you mean. So you try to find out other ways and other means of telling things. Now, that's a problem all over the world, but it was, for a time, it was kept very, very tight in the Jewish schools. In fact, they say that somebody told the story that they heard in Beit Midrash 30 years later, and they didn't want to talk to him. He says, this is a babbler. See, after 20 years, you should have kept it quiet. So this Yehuda ben Dirim, it was an interesting discussion, usually not done in public, so he told it. And as it is, stories are told. They are told to people who are trustworthy, and you say, I'm telling only to you and not to anybody else. And of course, the stories spread, and the stories were heard in the circles of the government. So the Roman government heard about this discussion. So they got a nice report of what it was. So they made very fast decisions, because they were basically clear cut in many decisions. It said Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, who was praising us and make us, so to say, aggrandize us. So he'll become big. He will be given a position that in every place where he comes, he will, by order of the government, will be the head of the speakers. So he got it. It wasn't a Jewish understanding, but it was it was the government decided that he is now the chief speaker for the Jew in every gathering. So Yossi, that is kept quiet. He didn't say anything. We cannot do anything. So he should go to Tzipori. Tzipori is a big town. In fact, it is. Even though the sense here is that he will go to Tzipori, will be exiled to Tzipori. It seems that Rabbi Yossi wasn't exiled to Tzipori. It was a kind of a punishment to be confined to his native town. So he doesn't go to other places. He keeps in his own town, and is not allowed to elsewhere. And Rabbi Shimon, who said such bad things about this, will be killed. So they condemned it to death. That's a very, very, very simple way. It's a traitor. He's speaks against the government, and so he has to be killed. So that was the position. So then, well, it is an order. So and of course they sent policemen, whatever it is, to search for him. So he went, he and his son. He had we don't know, but seemingly his son was famous in other ways, and also traditionally is buried. See, the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is now in this small city, around the small city of Miron, near the city of Safed in the Upper Galilee. So their burial places, their tombstones are next to each other. He was also a very interesting person, and one can talk about him because there's enough material to talk about him as people, as in their way, in their life, and so on. But anyway, he was the closest person to his father, so his father took him, and so what they did, they hid in the study hall. I mean, they were not at home. They left home. So when anybody at home was asked about them, so the wife or other people that remained there said they don't know. They are just they fled, but they didn't flee very far. They fled in Bet Midrash. Bet Midrash is usually not a place which is full of people. When people come, so everybody kept quiet. So they hid there. So every day, the wife of Rabbi Shimon used to bring them a piece of bread and and some water in it. And so they were eating together, and they were more or less content with that. It's surely not a great or important meal, but it is there. So with the time, the order became harsher, which is what really happens in such cases is, see, there was an order. It was given by the government. So about Rabbi Yehuda, to make Rabbi Yehuda the head of the speakers, it was easy. To keep Rabbi Yossi in his town was also easy. To catch Rabbi Shimon, he wasn't caught. There are many times in which the government gives orders. Governments are apt to give orders, but they are not always keen about it. Here, because the situation, again, we can elaborate about the situation, the political situation. Political situation was still full of strife and fear and war behind it. So they thought that having Rabbi Shimon, who was seemingly, even from the beginning, one of the zealots, one of those who were following, like his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, following Bar Kochva and so on. So having him going on and preaching or speaking about it, so they made, the orders became more tight. I mean, which was at the beginning some kind of an order which they hoped that, okay, there are all kinds of orders and they will be forgotten. It wasn't forgotten, it became tighter. So then Rabbi Shimon got frightened because he heard that they are searching for them in a more serious way. And so they decided to hide in a cave, which there are caves in the Galilee, there's still enough caves, so they hid in a cave in the Galilee, which they are more or less, nobody knows about them, they are just alone. And then a miracle happened to them. In the place they had, it was created, or it grew up there, a carob tree. Now, carob trees are they were used and still used somehow as agricultural trees, but they also grow almost on the wild. They are fruit is not considered very, see, it's very fun or very fancy, but it is curb fruit was considered something that, let's put it this way, and usually the curb fruit, which is you have still the trees are. If one of you goes to Jerusalem, you have one of the avenues, small avenues in Jerusalem that has curb trees planted around it, and you can see the curbs falling along. Now, when the fruits, when the trees are watered and tended to, the fruits are better. They have a certain amount of sugar in them, so a person can sustain himself on that. Usually, even in those times, curb fruit was given to the animals. People can eat it, and so Rabbi Shimon and his son didn't have so much of a choice. They have a wild tree that gives fruit, and they are quite big trees, so they give enough fruit. So they ate the fruit of the curbs, and they had there some small spring of water, so they could somehow live there. And now, because they were there and they didn't know how long they were there, they will be going there, and so they were afraid that being dressed there, the dresses will spoil with being there, and nobody takes care of the dresses. So what they did was something. They did something which was a different way. They were sitting immersed to their necks in sand, so they are not naked. They are covered, well covered, and the dresses were there for in the outside, and so they were all day. They used to sit and study. And well, let me just add that because in those times most of the study of Torah was done orally. There were hardly any books. So every kind of learning, so the master and the pupil, the father and the son, it was anyway done like in this way. So the master would say whatever has to be said, and then the pupil would try to learn to remember it by heart. That was the way that which the oral law went for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, from one generation to another. And so in the time of prayer, they would go out of the sand, they would dress, and they would pray, because the notion is that prayer is also, among other things, it's not just an emotional thing. It's also a duty and a point in which a person stands. That is, I know that prayers are not considered now in the same level, but praying means I'm standing before the Lord. I'm not just standing before Him. I'm standing before Him in a way which is a you-thou meeting. It is, I am speaking, blessed art thou, God. And I'm speaking to Him, not he or him, but I'm speaking thou. See, as close as I can. So that is a kind of a not just a ceremony, but also that is worship. And so because of that, they would dress properly and do the prayers. After praying, they would again would take off the clothes in order the clothes shouldn't waste, and they would just go back to the sand and sit and learn. And so they went on for a very long time, which is they are alone in some wilderness in the Galilee. The weather is not terribly hard. They had a source of food in some way. Possibly they could find some other herbs around there. They had water, and so they could survive. And that's what they did. They studied and survived, and as much as they could. It is about it, and if one thinks about this kind of the strange relationship, the strange connection, and the intensity of it. Intensity is people don't really have anything to do but sitting and transmitting the law, discussing the law, dealing with the law, and that's what they are doing. That's what they are doing. Now, that is, and it was always, it's even mentioned in some of the later time poetry about it, the time of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son in the cave, which is to be secluded and to do a life which is only done for one purpose, which is the study and the worship. So they were there, stayed there for about 12 years in the cave. So it's quite a long time, and in which lots of things changed. Incidentally, quite possibly the government of Rome changed. There was a new emperor. Now the new emperor of Rome was the emperor that fought against the Jews. Was possibly not so harsh, but he had a very bitter fight with them. Adrian died. The emperors after him were friendly to the Jews, some of them especially friendly, and we know about them. So the atmosphere at least became better. But they didn't know anything about it. They were staying in the cave alone. So then stood Elijah the prophet, who is coming as a miracle, and stands on the entrance of the cave and says, "Who will tell Bar Yochai, the son of Yochai, which is Rabbi Shimon, that the emperor died and all his edicts are now void?" So he heard it. He didn't come get it kind of an open revelation, because the story about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his becoming higher and higher spiritually, which is written in other books and other places, and he was from the very beginning an exceptional person, but with a very strong and very much internalized way of view, which we became more and more connected to to deal on one hand with the law, on the other hand dealing with what I call with the esoteric teaching. So this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Anyway, he heard it that now there's a time they can be free. So they are now see the emperor is dead, so they can go home back. So they went out of the cave. Now, when they come out of the cave, just imagine they are for 12 years alone. And they are alone, immersed only in one subject. There's no other subject of discussion, no other thing. You don't see people. And they saw people that are doing what people are doing. People are plowing the fields, the people are sowing. I mean, just the usual way. What they saw was just natural life, which was for them, see, being alone, even though not a big distance, but being alone in the cave. So they come and see people, just simple people. And so they said to each other, how can it be that people are just, what are they doing? They are living the eternal life, and they are dealing only with ephemeral aspects of life. So they said it's not the you see when a person they live the kind of they live the life of hermits for years, and it's a very tight hermetic existence. They are living it, and there's only one subject, which is God and His Torah. This is the only subject in which they have it, they are discussing. So there's nothing else. And when they come out and they see normal people, and they say, how can a person be like this? Don't they understand that the greatness of the Lord and the worship of the Lord is eternal and is what I call infinitesimal, and people are just doing all kinds of these little things. They are just busy in doing the daily work. And so it says, where every place they were looking at, it would be burnt, because they gained such powerful personalities that were there. The fact that they were displeased, that they were not happy with the world, was immediately like what I call it wasn't a curse. They didn't go to in any kind like cursing, but their feeling of that the world is unworthy was something that they are so to say, they seem to be like holy, completely unified, unique kind of people that are only living in their life and in God and with God. And so they are killing the world. The world cannot exist with them. And so it says, it came a voice from heaven and says to him, do you go? Did you get out of the cave to destroy my world? Go back to your cave. If you can't understand the world, and when you are going out and you see normal people, not bad people, just normal people, when you see those normal people out in the working, and you cannot say that you are killing them, so you go back. You are not fit to be with people, and so they came back, and they were sitting another 12 months in the cave, as they said that they had a verdict which was that they did behave well, that the way that they behaved, the way that they spoke was not just harsh, but it was unjust. So they should be punished for it. So they are going again to this exile. Now they are going it not just to save themselves, but also to feel that they are punished for being now alone, and in order to atone for what they are, for the inability to understand the normal people. So they, after 12 months, they decided it's possibly enough for us, because they say that the judgment of the wicked in hell is also only for 12 months. So we stayed here for 12 months. It's like being sent to hell. And so again, they heard the voice saying to them, which says, "Go out of your cave. You are allowed to go out." No, and then again they are going out, and the world is the same world. See, the world didn't stop to be a normal world. People working, staying, talking with each other. It's a usual world. Now it says there, in every place which Rabbi Elazar would, by his anger, hate the people, because he was. You have to remember, he was much younger. And he was full of enthusiasm, and he was a real zealot then. He changed with the time also, but at that time he was so. He still couldn't understand the way that people are living a normal way. But Rabbi Shimon was an older person. He began to understand that it is more complex. It's not a simple way of black and white, the right way. And it's not the right way and the wrong way. It is a more complex way. So he would heal the world, and he would tell his son, please don't be so angry. You say that how can a world be without God? How can people go and drive their cars and go into the stock market? How can people go and go to the supermarket to buy a new brand of food? I mean, it is just so unimportant and unworthy. And so, because Rabbi Elazar says the world is the only thing that is worthwhile for people is that you do as a person, as a man, you have only one basic duty, which is fit for a man, which is you worship God. And now you come to a world and people are doing all kinds of things. So Rabbi Shimon tries to suit him. And at the end, when he says, how can a world exist like this? He says, my son, it's enough for the world that just me and you. See, it's enough. We are the two people that are devoted completely, entirely to worship of God. And it's similarly, when we speak about the world, the universe, in a way, the universe, it is not just whatever everybody can achieve. It is the achievement of the very few, well, I say the few chosen ones, and they are the chosen of the chosen. Those people who are completely in a different realm. This is enough for the world. This is enough, as in other sources it speaks about it. It says, when there is one person that has a clear awareness of the divine, then he is enough to justify the existence of the world. So all the world is just a framework for such a person to exist, because it says, if the main point of the world is to be in contact with God, and that is what the people should to achieve to. So most people cannot. But if there is one person, he's really fulfilling the aim. He is making it. It is now worthwhile to have a world. It is, see, that is the only, if it is, we call it the voice of the Lord is calling to humanity, and we somehow we are stuck here and we don't listen, and so the voice is speaking without nobody. If one person hears it, it means there's now a communication, there's a justification for his existence of the world. So it says there are two of us, and we are really living in this world. So it's enough. We shouldn't stop other people from doing what they do. And so they are walking again in the same time, and they say, it was then the evening before beginning of Shabbat, and so they saw an old man holding in his hand 2 bunches of myrtle and running it was just before the night of Shabbat. He's seemingly running home with bringing the myrtles home. So they told him, why do you need this? You see, because whatever it is, a person is running with 2 bunches of myrtles. I mean, why? Why do you need them? Why are you running? So he answered them, I need them for the honor of Shabbat. So I want to make the Shabbat to honor the day of Shabbat. So I'm taking this what I call this scented branches in order to do something to honor the Shabbat, because it is still in some places still accustomed to have it done, even in our times. But basically, it was the idea is that in honoring the Shabbat, not everybody can honor it in every way. So even poor people can get some branches of myrtles, which are in those places and times are almost wild plants. So to take them home and to have some scent in the home for the honor of Shabbat. So they asked him, why do you need two bundles? One of them is enough. Isn't one enough? And so he says, he answered them. One is against, is connected with the notion of which is written in the first version of the Ten Commandments. Remember the day of Shabbat. The other one is against for the second version of the law of Shabbat, which is keep the law of Shabbat. So he says, so I'm taking the two branches because they are reminded me of the two facets of Shabbat, which in a different way are the positive and the way that in which people are doing things, and the other side which is keeping from not doing anything that is not permitted. So he says, then Rabbi Shimon says to his son, you see how the people of our Jewish people love the mitzvot. So you didn't understand that the fact that they are working so very hard all the day doesn't mean that they are forgotten, that they are neglecting anything. They still have it, and you see this old man just running to have a little bit of Shabbat. So, and then at this time they became slightly, we'll call, appeased. So they saw that it is the world is not so bad, which is a kind of an answer about it is, as you see, the story has two or more layers in it, and the one of the layers is again the historical, the political story there, which is the beginning. But after that you have the idea of which is not the usual way, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was anyway. He was an extremist all his life, and he was an extremist and a person that was given to spirituality and to meditation and to what are called to visions all his life. So when he stays in it possibly was from the beginning made like this, but these years in loneliness, doing only one thing, made it harsher and harder and more emphatic. But you see, it seems that is the other side of the story, which is we have here the people who fled that are now completely alone, sitting and studying and not doing nothing else. That is one thing, which is a kind of a very special, a monkish kind of a life, not in any format, but still in a way in which people are alone and devoted only for worship. And then the continuation of the story is a continuation with the Gemara does. See, these people became perhaps too extreme. They couldn't see the world in any other view. See, you have the only meaning of the world is worship. The only meaning of the life is worshiping God. So can people just go on and live their normal life? See, working at the field, working at what they have. Can people go on like this? Is there? And so in that they are just what I call slapped over the hand, so to say. They are not punished in a much harsher way, but slapped, and they are told you should reconsider it. And so they stayed there, and they begin to reconsider that it doesn't mean what they see in the world and what their own experience. Their own experience is the experience of those very few, always the few, who can can live a life that is devoted only for worship. But they are singular people, very few of them that can exist in the world. But there is a world of people they have to support the continuous existence of the world and whatever is in it. So you have to see it. And then, if you accept it, and you are not too angry as the son was at the beginning, you find out then that the same people that you say, okay, you have them. They are, and you can say, okay, here, look at these people. They're Americans. The only thing that I think about is possibly money, a little bit of sex, and what else? Some kind of going for a vacation to the Bahamas. So, is this a life of a human being? Is this a life of a human being? So you say, okay, it is perhaps not a complete life to justify humanity. And if you speak about humanity, perhaps humanity needs higher purposes, higher aims. But the people are not completely forgetful. When you think that the people don't really know and don't really care, they do care. They don't care in such a way, but they have it in their mind, and it's a part of what they are. So, when you see it, and you see the world is not just made of black and white, 1 and 0. It has different colors, and that is again in itself. This story in itself is a story about devotion, being extreme in devotion, and getting to understand again what happens in the world. So that is another part of the same story. So